Have you ever tried printing using the sun? Well, how about sun printing onto fabric? Cyanotype printing is a lot of fun, and one of the small benefits of a heat wave is you get a great amount of UV light to do your printing. This video will cover the supplies I used and briefly explain the differences between Cyanotype and SolarFast. Then for each experiment, I list the fabrics used, methods for soaking and exposing the fabrics, amount of solution used, and the UV and exposure times. At the end, I'll also share how I'm going to care for my printed fabrics. Hi, I'm Amy, and today I thought I'd share some fabric printing I did this summer, July 2026 if you're watching in the future, using Cyanotype and SolarFast methods. I'm hoping to inspire you and perhaps help your own printing experiments. If you're new to this channel, I'm a dressmaker and fashion lover, so all my experiments are on fabric because I want to wear my prints. And yes, several of them are craft themed, nothing better than showing off your love of sewing in your own wardrobe. So very quickly, how does a cyanotype work? Well, if you're here to learn about the experiments, you'll probably already know, so you could probably skip ahead to another chapter. But for anyone who doesn't, you mix a light sensitive 2-part iron salt solution together, and that reacts to light exposure and dyes the fabric blue. Blueprints are the most famous and what you've seen if you commonly Google or search online for this technique. You can also get SolarFast, which is a variation on the original process, but is pre-mixed and comes in a range of colours. Everything you put on top of your treated fabric or paper blocks the amount of light that gets through and interferes with the chemicals reacting. Something solid will stop the reaction entirely, but most items are semi-transparent or translucent, so some light will get through, but that creates interesting shadows and textures. It's really clever. There's free web software from Jacquard where you can create a black and white inverted image from any photo, or you could use Photoshop or similar if you have access to them. A transparency film that you can use on an inkjet printer and print out a photo negative and expose like a high resolution image onto the fabric or paper. So let's talk Cyanotype and SolarFast chemicals by Jacquard. You can easily pick up these kits of Jacquard Sunprinting Cyanotype chemicals in blue. These are traditionally used on paper but do work on fabric absolutely fine. You add tap water to each bottle, shake vigorously and leave for 24 hours to cure. The bottles are light proof so your solutions won't get ruined before you're ready to expose. And to use them, you mix equal parts of each bottle in the quantity you need in a little bowl and then apply that mixture to your paper or fabric. You can either leave your treated paper and fabric to dry before use or expose it to light while it's still wet or damp. I'll show you what happened when I did both wet and dry printing. One kit made me 2 t-shirts and a pair of jeans, no spoilers, but I was a little short of solution at the end. I also had a starter kit of SolarFast solution. This set from Jacquard has 3 lots of chemicals that are a better fit for fabric dyeing and includes a special washing detergent to use to set your print. It's technically not a cyanotype chemical, but it works in the same way. The 2-bottle solution can fade quickly if washed in normal detergent and hot water. SolarFast is built to avoid this by using different chemicals that are more permanent. Each colour comes in a single bottle, pre-mixed. They have a wide range of colours, plus the bottle of SolarFast detergent, which is designed to wash out any leftover chemicals immediately after printing to avoid changes in your print. After that, you can switch back to using regular detergent. On to the experiments. I pulled out a wide variety of shapes, styles and colours of buttons from my stash. I also made sure I picked haberdashery and buttons in a range of translucencies. So a translucent object refracts the light as it passes through. So glass and plastic buttons with facets or mixtures of colour look really great after printing. Lace creates a pretty effect too. I also chose more solid items like scissors, an unpicker, thread snips, buckles, snap fasteners. Pins needed to have quite thick shafts to show up, so I chose flower-headed heavyweight varieties, as well as a mix of little and large safety pins. I also printed a negative of my cat Chewy looking cute, longingly out the window. I made this relatively small, about 19 centimeters tall, so I could turn it into a little pouch or a toy. Printed that on transparency film. From my street and garden, I collected leaves, flowers and other foliage to try a botanical print as well. I pressed some of these ahead of time to get them to lay as flat as possible. What to print on? Okay, well, I have a street full of charity shops here in Ilkley, which gave me lots of options for printing on ready-made clothing. There are some small challenges working with assembled clothing, but nothing you can't deal with. Look for 100% natural fibres. Cotton, linen works best, but you could also look for denim, canvas, modal, viscose. 100% silk. I'm not sure you'll find that in the charity shop, but if you're printing on unsewn fabric, they're all great choices for good results. You will probably want white or pale fabrics because that will give you a nice contrast for the finished print and won't skew the intended colour. You could experiment with bleaching some fabric first if you want a paler base for a more subtle effect. Try printing on something darker or something with an already printed pattern. You're going to wash your garment or fabric before printing and make sure to avoid fabric softeners. The residue stops the chemicals from soaking evenly into the threads. Other supplies you're going to need are a pair of scales and a wide mouth bowl, tub, pot to mix your solution, plus a stirring implement, and either a foam brush or an old cleaned spray bottle. I used an old Febreze bottle. You want lots of towels and plastic sheets like a bin liner that you can place underneath to protect your floor or table from any soak through. Boards or cardboard to place inside or under your fabric. A sheet of glass is also helpful from an old picture frame if you want to press items in place, and then the board from the old picture frame could go under or inside the fabric too. Bulldog clips can come in handy to keep the fabric taut as well. I made my temporary shade outside using 2 chairs and a large towel over the top, but a thick blanket would also work. Perhaps a sun umbrella if it's not too transparent. You want something, an area you can work where you're in the shade and then you remove that to reveal the light rather than trying to move your assembled print into the sunshine. Experiment 1, this was the round neck tee. It's 95% cotton and 5% elastane. It took 4 minutes to lay out all of my items and 7 minutes of exposure time. It was a UV of 7 and it took 45 millilitres of each cyanotype solution mixed together to apply to the t-shirt. At my local Oxfam shop, I found this round neck t-shirt, but it had a small amount of elastane mixed in. And then there was a stain around the stomach area, but I knew that I would cover that with my printing. The first design was a rectangle on the front of the top with dribbles extending off. I had a stain that I knew I wanted to cover, which controlled the shape of my rectangle. I used black electrical tape to get the rough shape. Now the black tape would have stopped the light getting through and I would have ended up with a very crisp edge, but I decided to just take that off after I'd sketched out the rough shape. I tried to apply with a large foam sponge, but it's really not easy to transfer to a stretchy fabric like this with the elastane. It was painfully slow. I really loaded the sponge and tried to soak it in. I used a hairdryer to dry the chemicals before taking it outside, but it actually started to expose in patches indoors, which panicked me. I raced outside, I'd set up my shaded area and positioned the tee while I arranged all the items. It took me several minutes to place all those items on, all the buttons and bits. Then I removed the towel for full exposure. I had a picture frame board inside the tee, which created a flat surface for the buttons and minimised wrinkles. I made sure not to stretch the tee in any way while that was inside. And then it also prevented any light leaking I mean, there wasn't much risk of that because the back of the tee hadn't been splashed in any way, but just in case, the board provided a good solid stop point for the sun. Because the sun was at the highest point of the day, we're talking about 12 o'clock, it moved quite a bit during printed, so some items have quite long shadows. I would say the elastane content in the tee had minimal effect on the actual printing process, though it does slightly affect the finished print when wearing, because as the fabric stretches naturally around your body, the image does appear a little whiter where the undyed threads show through. The rectangle print is the easiest to achieve, and the dribbles are a subtle way to show that it's handmade. For the V-neck tee, it took 6 minutes of item placing in parcel shade and then 12 minutes of exposure time. This was around 1:30 and it was a UV of 10, absolutely scorching. It's 100% cotton tee and I used 63 milliliters of each solution mixed together. So I grabbed a white V-neck t-shirt from M&S, which had a slight stain at the neck and armholes that I couldn't get off, but I knew I could cover with my printing. It was 100% cotton, which was perfect. I sealed the curtains up tighter in my prep room to reduce the light in that room to avoid any unwanted exposure, but that made it a bit harder to see what I was doing. This time I used the spray bottle to distribute the solution and it was much quicker and easier, though I probably oversprayed a couple of areas just by not being able to see what I was doing. This time I didn't let it dry very long and just moved everything outside for a wet print. I added a second towel to my shaded area to increase the shadow. And it took over 6 minutes to position everything on the full shirt front. There was more buttons to place this time. I used 2 boards inside the tee as well, and I placed it on a slight angle this time to help reduce the shadows. After 12 minutes, I flipped it over and exposed the back, where I'd used a mixture of spray and splodges to minimize the contrast to the front. I should have done the full back on none at all because it did create quite a dark shoulder line at the back, and I'm going to go back in and fix that. I would say this is my favourite of all the prints. The items are really crisp and detailed, no shadows, no issues with it being a wet print, which surprised me. They would say it makes a less crisp image, but this looks great and the shade of blue is very impressive. So how did I fix my V-neck tee? Well, I used SolarFast. So I went in with the blue SolarFast and added more to the tee back. I tried to focus on spraying areas that were white and avoid putting too much over printing on the previous blue areas. I also used 2 boards to prevent any light or solution reaching the front of the tee and affect my previous printing. I used 20 milliliters of SolarFast solution and then printed for 15 minutes. I washed it out in the scorching hot water and using the SolarFast detergent as described in the linen shirt experiment. This was perfect. The back of the tee now looks more like the front and is less distracting. There's obviously still some white patches, but it looks great when worn. For the jeans, I did 6 minutes of item arranging in partial shade and then 10 minutes front and 10 minutes back exposure. This was around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, or nearly 3. This was a UV of 5 to 6 and a denim elastane mix. If you remember, 94% cotton, 5% polyester, 1% elastane. And I used 140 milliliters of each cyanotype solution. The jeans were found in Martin House, a local Yorkshire charity of hospice care for children and families. I actually really like the fit of these jeans. They're kind of high-waisted cropped jeans, but I plan to clone them and turn them into my own pair of full-length jeans at a later date. I talk about cloning clothes in another one of my videos. They cost me £6 and I think they were donated because of the awkward dye stain mark around the crotch. Again, I knew that would be covered up during printing. These were going to be a tricky experiment because they are cotton and polyester mix with elastane thrown in too. But I'd seen so many cool jean prints that I really wanted to have a go. Okay, the jeans were a bit of a disaster because I didn't have enough solution to fully soak into the denim. It was very thick, and again, I was in the dark, so it was very hard to see what areas weren't soaked enough. This was another wet print, aka I didn't let the fabric dry before exposing. I managed to place all my flowers quickly, and then this time used the glass sheets to hold everything flat, so to keep the flowers pressed into the fabric, because the wind can very easily move something like florals and affect the crispness of the print. Plus, you know, pressing a 3D shape gives you a more clean outline. But the moisture in the jeans made the glass sheets cloud up, so I had to take those off, otherwise the print would have been ruined. Then the flowers weren't fully pressed in place, and the wind did move a couple of them slightly awkwardly. Then I also had too many jeans creases that were stopping the light, and the flower stems were a bit too thin in places to print. Several flowers have ended up too abstract to tell what they even are. I think the polyester affected the ability for the chemicals to soak in. Plus it's a very dense fabric, isn't it? I would have probably needed double the amount of solution that I ended up using. As it was, it took over 15 minutes to wash out fully as well. The water would just not run clear. I should have washed out in the washing machine, really. When they dried, I could really see the issues of not using enough solution with awkward dye gaps. There are some unfortunate shaped blotches that are near the crotch and rear that make me laugh. So I'm not sure I'll be wearing these out and about. My plan is to fade the print as much as possible and then over dye the jeans into a dark navy. Always remember, the process of trial and error includes error. The linen shirt was 10 minutes of item arranging in partial shade and 20 minutes exposure time. This was about 11:50 in the day and a UV of 6. So it's 100% linen, and I used 60 millilitres of SolarFast violet solution. I found a 100% linen shirt from M&S in my size, which had a stain on the collar that I managed to get out before the wash. That was £4 for that one. Using black electrical tape, I masked off the button band and the collar, as well as just beyond the shoulder and side seams, because I wanted to do a better job of controlling the print. So just the 2 front panels were printed. I respected the SolarFast instructions and I foam sponged it onto the front. That took ages and frustrated me again. I hate using a foam sponge. I couldn't really tell if it was saturated enough because it's a different colour. It's quite grey, the SolarFast. But I let it dry for 10 minutes while I set up my equipment outside. But like cyanotypes, you can use it damp if you want to. So I didn't leave it any longer than 10 minutes. It probably was still a little damp. And I cracked right on. SolarFast needs a longer exposure than cyanotype, and this varies depending on the colour. I created my shade system again, but as before, it still started reacting immediately in the shade. I started placing my objects at 11:40 and then removed the shade at 11:50 and left it out into the sun till 12:10. I was quite rushed in placing my objects as I felt a lot of pressure to be fast, and it was a big area, so I wasn't as strategic about positioning the pieces on there. You'll see how the larger items point the same way. I was quite obsessed with not getting a button in an awkward position, and I think I managed that. So it was again the highest point of the day. The sun was moving quickly as per my first experiment with the round neck t-shirt, but I couldn't wait until 2 or 3 p.m. because I knew cloud cover was coming back. So I had several shadows again. I would have put the shirt on a slant if it were possible, but it was hard enough getting it to lay flat. This is the problem with pre-made clothing. And I would definitely recommend for something like this, getting a large sheet of strong cardboard and cutting it to the perfect dimensions of your garment. Trying to use 2 rectangular boards didn't quite work for this shirt. I had to overlap them, make up the width, and I really should have had a third one to make it long enough to support the entire shirt. There's a small crease near the button band that I spotted in time to lessen, so you can adjust slightly, but you don't want to knock anything off. But yeah, an assembled shirt will not lay completely flat. And thank goodness I had the button band masked off, because that let me overlap the front slightly to help it lay better. The SolarFast needs to be washed out in incredibly hot water with 1 or 2 caps of the SolarFast detergent. So hot it hurts your hands a little bit, and it needs to be in there for around 15 to 20 minutes ideally. You keep refilling the hot water to avoid it cooling down. A couple of times I fully drained the sink and then started again with half a cap of detergent in the water because it was still foaming on my garment, so there was enough left in there to be foamy enough. The heat and the washing fluffed up some of the fibres of my shirt, so they were a bit more worn than the rest of the top, which is a shame, but it's not too noticeable. Chewy on fabric. Reminder, this was 100% cotton fabric square. It had a UV of 6, a 20-minute exposure. It took 35 ml of the SolarFast blue solution. From my fabric stash, I had a square of plain cotton fabric. It wasn't very big, but I thought this would be good for testing as well. This was a disaster. First, I put too much solution on, and I should have blotted the excess off. They do say don't let it be absolutely drenched. Or I could have let it dry for a lot longer than I did. With the negative print and then the glass on top, it just got so steamy and wet with the fabric. The condensation obliterated my image. I also left it out probably a touch too long, so the blues went very dark. She's like a Victorian ghost child peering through when you hold it up to the light. Not a success. So how am I going to care for my printed clothes? All of these items will be washed inside out with similar colours on a cold 30-degree wash going forward. You've got to aim to wash these as little as possible. I won't be using fabric softener in the wash for these because that leaves chemicals on the surface of clothes that can affect the print. If you like creative clothing, make sure to subscribe and let me know in the comments if you have any questions about my printed fabrics. Thanks for watching, everyone.